It's my pleasure to chair today's panel discussion entitled We Can Certainly Change Something, which is, I understand from Michael Stainton, was a motto or is a motto of the new power party in Taiwan. This is an opportunity to reflect upon the recent elections in Taiwan and to hear from some very knowledgeable and thoughtful people about the implications of the election on a range of questions that are very important to Taiwan. So we're so delighted to have all of you here. How we're going to proceed this afternoon is I will introduce each speaker just before they speak and familiarize yourself a little bit with them in case you don't know them. And after each of them speaks, we will have some time set aside for questions and discussion with the audience. We look forward to that as well. A few people are just getting their seats, but I think we can push right ahead. So we're going to hear from Michael Stainton first. And Michael's connections with Taiwan go back to his student days in 1974. But since then, he's spent really most of his life working in Taiwan or working on Taiwan, even while living here in Canada and in Toronto. He's a minister with the Disciple of Christ Church. He was a missionary in Taiwan for many years with the Presbyterian Church, working predominantly in social and community development work with Taiwan indigenous peoples. Michael is a research associate at the York Center for Asian Research, where he leads a lot of our research and activities related to Taiwan. When he's not doing that, he's a founder and active secretary with the Canadian Mackay Committee. He is a member of the Taiwanese United Church in Toronto, where he serves on the board. And he has been quite active in observing and studying Taiwan's political process. He was part of election observation groups in Taiwan in 1992 and again in 2012, actually when we were on the same election observation mission during the last presidential election. He also did field work in Taiwan, including in observing the 1991 National Assembly election and the 98 legislative election. So indeed, he comes with a wealth of historical understanding and observations to reflect upon. We're really delighted to be able to hear from him fresh back from Taiwan and observing another couple of elections. So we'll start with Michael.
Thank you, Susan. Fresh back with a cold from the record cold blast that hit Taiwan just 2 days before I came home. My job is to speak mainly about the election and its entailments in Taiwan itself, because I know our other two speakers will be talking about issues in terms of Taiwan-China relations and Taiwan and the world. The little blue handout you have here is part of my talk to save wasting time on sort of all sorts of statistics and numbers. They're all there for you. As well as a statement from the Election Observation Group, which we were all part of, the International Election Observation Group, which brought us to Taiwan. So we have to thank them for making it possible for us to go to Taiwan. The first thing I want to say is that this election is the first of many that I have observed or even been part of in Taiwan that was not mainly about identity issues or Taiwan-China. Of course, the issue of Taiwanese identity in China is always there, no matter what you talk about in Taiwan, but these were not what was debated and highlighted in the election. So for a change, this was not a Taiwan issue about Taiwanese identity and about China. It was rather a completion of the 2014 Sunflower Movement. This was the student-led movement which occupied the legislature in Taiwan for almost 3 weeks in the spring of 2014. The student leaders and young academics who kicked down the doors of the legislature, literally, now some of them have gone into the legislature to sit down as legislators in Taiwan, as representatives of the new power party, the Shudai Liliang party. And the issues which they were concerned about in 2014 really became the main issues of the election. And those things include things like government reform and government transparency, especially the end of secret party negotiations within the legislature to come up with compromises to produce bills, the same way that it happens in the American Congress. So that this is one of their primary demands, that we must have a transparent legislature where things are worked out in committees and in public, not in negotiations between the parties, and all the horse trading which goes on as part of that. The issue of youth unemployment and youth underemployment is a big one in Taiwan. So many students with degrees, graduate degrees from top universities in North America come back to Taiwan and can't get a decent job which is commensurate with their qualifications. And so youth employment and underemployment was a major concern, and this was talked about by all of the parties. And the solutions to that differ depending which party. As far as the KMT was concerned, the real solution to this would be more engagement with China, more investment from China, more exchange with China, which would create more jobs and deal with this issue. For the DPP and the New Power Party, it's investment in new investment in high technology, medical and nanotechnology, and more active attempts to reach out to the world, which Taiwan always does, but to do it even more so. Housing affordability, the cost of housing in Taipei especially is an issue. Many people say they can't afford to rent an apartment in Taipei. Elder care. Taiwan is, along with Japan, is one of the world's fastest aging societies, and how they take care of old people is a major issue. Food safety. There had been a number of scandals in 2015 about food safety and pollutants in cooking oil and other things. And so this has always been an issue in Taiwan, and this became a major issue in this election too. Pension reform. The government military pension plan, everyone agrees is months away from being bankrupt, and the other pension plans are not doing any better. So they need a comprehensive plan to fund the pensions in Taiwan. Transitional justice, 转型正义, which in Taiwan means two things. Relieving the KMT of all of its stolen assets, all of the Japanese and other properties that the KMT took and kept for itself when they got Taiwan back in 1945. And these billions and billions of dollars of assets is what funds the KMT vote buying machine. And so with a new majority in the legislature, this is certainly going to be something that's going to be addressed. Also, high government officials and retired military officers, when they put money in the bank, they get a privileged 18% interest rate on their bank deposits, which ordinary people or lower level civil servants have. This has always been a sore issue in Taiwan, and now with a new government, this probably is going to be addressed as well. Less important, but also their Aboriginal rights, the issue of Aboriginal self-government. There's been a bill in the legislature for years, and it's going back and forth and not gone anywhere. And also same-sex marriage, which both the New Power Party and DPP said they support a law revising the marriage laws to take out any gender reference. So these were the issues in the election, as well as the credibility of the two main presidential candidates. And Ing-wen, who lost 4 years ago to Ma Ying-jeou because the Americans didn't really trust her, has worked very hard to present herself as a reasonable, a stable reformer and a responsible leader. And that message had got across both to the Americans and people in Taiwan. The KMT wasn't sure what they were offering. In fact, of course, they had to change their presidential candidate in October, which was unheard of. So the KMT, really people didn't know what they were going to get with the KMT anymore. Now, in this election, some of these younger people here who were part of the student movements in 2014, and there were others besides the Sunflower Movement, they formed a political party called the New Power Party, and Tsai Ing-wen very wisely decided not to run DPP candidates against them so they could have a better chance of getting elected. Excuse me. But also to endorse them. So there's Tsai Ing-wen with Hong Tzu-yong, and Tsai Ing-wen with Freddie, a rock star, and head of Amnesty International Taiwan. Also loaned DPP resources, staff, and expertise to help them run their campaigns. So the result was 3 of these candidates, these 2 here and another one, a young professor called Huang Guotang, defeated 3 very senior KMT candidates in their constituencies. The New Power platform, in many ways, sounds like the DPP platform of 25 years ago, emphasizing the importance of developing a Taiwan-centric identity, getting Taiwan into the United Nations, social welfare. The DPP originally was much more of thought of itself as a social democratic party, but has moved more and more to the center as their electoral success has grown. And so having 5 of these New Power Party people in the legislature, with the DPP having a very solid majority, will probably keep the DPP legislators from falling asleep and keep pushing them in the direction of the DPP's own original vision for Taiwan. So it will be interesting, and of course people are already discussing, well, 4 years from now, will the NPP still be around, or will they just be folded into the DPP? So, but I think it was a very wise decision on the part of Taiwan. She didn't quite co-opt all the student movement, but she gave them space to enter the legislature as allies of the DPP, but still upholding their own principles. Unlike 4 years ago, when, as I said, the United States pretty clearly expressed a preference for Ma, because he would give us stability, and Tsai wasn't reliable. This time the United States stayed neutral, but also emphasized that they knew and trusted Tsai, and didn't matter who won the election, the United States was very happy. The results of the election are all in this little blue handout, so I'm not going to go over them, but even it was a disaster for the KMT, an unprecedented disaster. And so if we think about some of the prospects for the future, there are some worries about the long 4-month period between the election and the inauguration of the new president. And could something happen in between there, but the United States has sent very strong messages to both Ma and to China not to try anything funny, so I don't think this is going to be a problem. There was one incident that happened just during the election campaign. A young Taiwanese singer in a Korean pop band named Cho Zi-in, she had herself photographed with the Republic of China flag, and to show how proud she was of being Taiwanese. The owner of this Taiwanese pop group, because they go to China, forced her to make a public apology on television, and it was very tearful. It was very outrageous to see. She was sort of tearful and saying how she was proud to be Chinese and everything, and she was so sorry, and blah 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 for this. Well, this created a storm of outrage in Taiwan, and one post-election survey of voting tendencies, reported that among the 20 to 29-year-old voters in Taiwan, 16.5% of them said it was this Chou Ziyu incident, or the old Republic of China flag, that got them out of the dormitories and onto the trains to go home to vote. You have to go home to vote in Taiwan. There's no voting just where you live. You have to go where your household registry is. So, but I thought this was interesting. In past elections, people in the DPP, for the most part, and solid deep green supporters would want nothing to do with this old Republic of China flag. And yet, it seems that people in Taiwan have sort of adopted, well, this is our flag, and we're very proud of who we are, and we shouldn't have to endure our flag being insulted no matter what we feel about it at home. So this gives Taiwan, I think, a very solid support across the political spectrum in Taiwan to stand up for Taiwanese dignity around the world, but not to be caught up in debate about, well, why do we have to still keep this old flag? I think people have just accepted, well, this is our flag, and so we'll live with it. The new legislature opens February 1st. The DPP already has a bill ready to go, which will regulate the 4-month transition period and clearly limit the powers of the lame duck president. Other bills that are coming down the road will be serious reforms in the political system, including getting rid of the secret party negotiations, taking away KMT party assets. This will be an interesting one because the KMT will fight pretty hard to keep these, because without those assets they've lost pretty much the one thing that they can depend on to deliver votes to them. Legalizing same-sex marriage. An Aboriginal self-government bill that's been hung up for a long time will probably get passed, probably not this year, but next year. However, it will not be easy for Tsai to deliver on people's hopes for an improved economy, jobs, and housing, and this will be interesting to see how long her honeymoon and the DPP honeymoon with the public lasts. So the last question is the KMT finished or not? It was certainly, this is the first time ever since we're talking about since the days back in the Nanjing days, that the KMT has been totally out of power. They don't have the presidency, they don't have the legislature, they do not even control most of the major cities and counties in Taiwan, the local magistrates and the mayors. So they're going to be very hard pressed to rebuild their base. Meanwhile, they're fighting among themselves. The president was humiliated by his own premier, and that's a story that many of you may have seen in the papers, but the premier resigned in a rage when the president suggested having a joint cabinet with the DPP in 4 months. Ma went to his house to persuade him not to resign, and the premier wouldn't even see him, so he left Ma standing outside the door for 5 minutes with all the media there, filming the humiliated president. And the one person who people were thinking might be sort of a credible new KMT leader, one of the princelings, former mayor of Taipei, Hao Longbin, he was parachuted into what everyone assumed was a safe KMT seat in Geelong to run for legislature, which would put him in a strong position to then become the new leader of the KMT. Well, he lost. He lost because the local KMT factions in Geelong did not support him. So the KMT may not be finished in the long term, but they have to decide. They have to get their act together. And they have to decide what they stand for. So.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. A lot there to chew on as a kind of overview of the election, and some of the questions that face the new government and the new opposition, thoroughly in opposition. All right. We have the pleasure now of hearing from Sheng Shui, who is many things: a poet, a writer, a journalist in many ways, including as the correspondent for Radio Free Asia. And some of you may have heard her commentaries on radio and television. And the other part of her life is that she's a really tireless advocate for democracy and human rights in China. She's involved in many organizations, has been involved in founding many. At present, she is the president of the Federation for a Democratic China, which is an international organization for promoting democracy in China, and also chair of the June 4th massacre investigation and member of the head committee of the Forum for Democratization in China in Asia, among other organizational involvement she has in that part of her activist life. In addition, she has won many awards. In 2000, she was recognized by the Canadian Association for Journalists with their award for investigative journalism, and also the same year the National Magazine Award. In 2005, she won the National Ethnic Press Award and the Media Council Award for Journalism, and in 2012 was recognized with the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. Ms. Sheng is originally from Beijing, came to Canada in the context of the Tiananmen Square events, and has since been banned from visiting the country of her birth. We're very pleased to hear her reflections, indeed, on her impressions of the election and its implications, and in part, what it means for overseas Chinese and the overseas Chinese democracy movement.
Thank you very much, Susan. And I was very lucky to observe the election in Taiwan together with Michael and Charles this time. To observe the election in Taiwan for myself is a very special experience, and I have a very special feeling because, as Susan mentioned, that I come from China, and I have been denied to go back to my hometown for 26 years, 5 months. And also, I have a lot of relatives who went to Taiwan in 1949. And also, when I go to Taiwan, I feel it's kind of home, so it's quite different. And I went to Taiwan to observe the election. This is the 3rd time. I went to Taiwan 6 times in total. I feel strongly this time that the democracy in Taiwan is being matured. And so I really think that the election in 2016 is the democracy victory. It's not only the victory for Ms. Tsai Ing-wen, and for many angles, we can confirm this. First, that people are looking for change so eagerly. And when I was in Texas, I tried to talk to people. A lot of people, they experienced, they said, okay, it's been too bad. How bad it was, and people are looking for change. And second, the new generation is grown up, and they pay a lot of attention to those kind of social issues. And third, I think more and more people, they are not still controlled that much because of the colors, especially the blue and the green. And also, I feel that people are not frightened that much as before by the Chinese regime. And also, I could see, the community in Taiwan is much more matured, and the people are more calm for the election, not as in the year 2004 when I was there. The campaign for election was so busy, every streets, and the people were so exciting, were so angry, and they think it was going to be either the new hope for the country or the end for the country. So it's very on Europe. Of course, since I'm living in Canada for 26 years, we experience a lot of elections here. We don't think that it's going to be the end or going to be a totally new hope for the country if who is going to be elected. But in Taiwan is, people have a very strong feeling about that. Some people think that if the Kuomintang is going to be re-elected and it's going to be the dark end for the country, or other part of the people think that if the Kuomintang is going to be failed and it's going to be the end of the country, blah, blah, this kind of stuff, it's really different. And for myself, as an overseas Chinese democracy activist, I, of course, always thinking about the relationship between China and Taiwan. Actually, when I see in this forum, the relationship between China and Taiwan, maybe a lot of mainland Chinese, won't accept, right? They will ask me to see mainland China and Taiwan, or the government in Taiwan and China. So it's this kind of things is being very serious. I rather to see that the relationship between China and Taiwan, and is going to have new challenges. Some people talked about if the CCP is going to start a war on this, since DPP won the election and the majority in legislative. I don't really believe that, because I don't think the CCP have this kind of ability to start a war. And second, the international community won't let it do this. And the third, and is the more important, is that if the CCP is going to start a war, it will be its own collapse. It will be the chance for its own collapse. So in this case, that I don't think they will do this, but still there are a lot of challenge between the two sides, and I think CCP will try its best to limit Taiwan in international communities, whatever it will do, whatever it will try. And Canada, and I was asked a question by the TV interview, said our liberal government, how would our liberal government will do since Taiwan is going to have a new government? And I said it's going to be a challenge, and since liberal little bit appears that it's being affected by the Chinese government, so I'm happy to say it can stand very independence for help a new democratic community to engage more and more to the international community. So of course I'm happy to see that, and also if we are going to talk about what kind of new challenge or say new choices for China, since Taiwan is already a pretty matured democratic community, and I think there are some choices. I was interviewed by a Taiwan radio. The host, he said that there is a chance for Taiwan to lease a province from China, let it to be a 试验田, 民主试验田, yeah, to try, Fujian. Yeah, they said they want to lease Fujian and to practice the democracy in Fujian. I said, yeah, it would be a very good idea, for China to experience this in somewhere. But I don't think it's easy to do so. And there is a movement in China and also in the overseas Chinese community we called 中华民国回归, mean to get ROC back to the mainland China. And since that people believe it is a shortcut for China to be a democratic community. So, well, anyway, it's a good try. And the last, or we see the worst, maybe there isn't much time or chance for China to develop democracy slowly, and there are a lot of challenges. And I don't think the government can solve the problem in a shorter time. So probably it's going to have, should I say, collapse of the regime, that everybody is going to face a new environment in that case. And probably it's going to be a chance for China to have a new life, and especially for Chinese people, because for the recent a few years, human rights situation is getting worse and worse in China. And also, there are a lot of signs showing Xi Jinping is not a very calm or logical person to run the country. So there are going to be a lot of chances, or we should say a lot of difficulties. So what I believe is going to be, or we should say, is already a new democratic revolution it's already started in China, because we could see the uprising or the kind of 反抗运动
resistance
resistance everywhere in China every day. So it's already a situation that I don't think the regime has enough, has enough power to control. So this is a new question or a challenge for Taiwan too, how to deal with if the Chinese Communist is going to be collapsed soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We now turn to our third speaker, who I believe was also on the same election observation, and that is a colleague from Brock University, Professor Charles Burton. And as well as his academic career, where he has published many books and articles about China and North Korea in particular, and also been a frequent commentator in the media, providing very astute commentary often that I appreciate a great deal. And but in addition, Charles has worked in the policy world, in particular in 2 stints in the Canadian Embassy in Beijing, where he's been counselor for political affairs, and does some consulting with governments. So coming from a slightly different background, and my understanding is that you're going to mainly talk about the international context.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
So I was asked to comment on Taiwan's politics and the implications of this election in the international context, particularly with regard to China and Canada. And as Michael and Xiangshi have said, the main impact of the election has been a massive discrediting of the KMT regime, and they're now in a minority position in the legislature. So really, the KMT is completely out of power for the first time since 1912. And I think from our observation as part of the international election observation mission, when we visited the campaign headquarters of the KMT, and based on a subjective look at the KMT rally in Taipei the night before they went down to defeat that I attended with Michael. On the face of it, one could argue that the KMT may be a spent political force in Taiwan and Chinese politics. You know, it appears to be a party of older people that is out of sync with the mood of the times in contemporary Taiwan, and rather listless and old and tired. On the other hand, the DPP, as Michael points out, is a child of the Sunflower, a student movement that erupted in the spring of 2014. And this movement was a response to the KMT rushing through legislation to enact a comprehensive goods and services agreement with China. And the students and their supporters argued quite effectively that this agreement and others that the KMT was in the process of preparing to extend the Taiwan-China economic integration would open the way to what they regard as unacceptable levels of mainland Chinese influence in Taiwan. So by integrating economically, it would give the mainland Chinese regime more leverage, and that future economic coercion could threaten Taiwan's current political autonomy status quo. So, you know, as Michael points out, a lot of this is about the 时代力量, the new power party. After the KMT was unable to suppress the movement through its traditional recourse to police violence, the KMT was forced to back off from its plan to ram these initiatives with China through the legislature. And of course, being forced to back down due to popular demand meant considerable loss of face for the KMT and for, you know, the supporters of further integration with mainland China. So the Kuomintang and the the KMT and the Chinese Communist Party really both lost face when the KMT had to back down from these measures to engage in further integration of the Taiwan and mainland economies. I think that history will judge whether this is a watershed moment in Taiwan's political transformation, because as Michael points out, the Democratic Progressive Party that's now in power both in the legislature, as a majority of seats in the legislature, and in the presidency, refuses to bow to China's insistence that Taiwan pay a lip service to China's identification of Taiwan as a province of one China. And when we were at the victory speech of President-elect Ing-wen, she asserted that Taiwan is a democratic and free country, and that Taiwan should not have to apologize for its identity. So it's pretty clear that this is quite a different way of understanding Taiwan as opposed to the more bracketed kind of identity that the KMT asserted. So the question is, can the KMT bring their political program back to life and regain power in a future election, or has the dynamic of Taiwan politics been permanently transformed by this election? If the KMT is truly completely done, then the dream of Taiwan eventually integrating into the People's Republic of China, or Songshui says the People's Republic of China will return and take over the mainland, whichever. If that's completely off the table, that could in fact have implications for Taiwan's mode of international relations in the years ahead, and not all of them necessarily good, I'm sorry to say, my assessment. Furthermore, we did have some meetings with representatives of foreign governments in Taipei, and particularly meeting with the representative of the government of Japan. I think that from that meeting, I got the impression that Taiwan and Japan could quite significantly enhance relations. The Japanese made reference to the compatibilities of the values of the DPP political program and the values informing Japan's democracy. So the implication is that the Japanese feel they can communicate and relate better with the DPP than they were able to with the KMT. And of course that reflects the difference in the attitude among the indigenous Taiwanese towards Japan in general, which is quite relaxed compared to the popular hostility that Japan engenders in China, because, you know, different histories. Taiwan was a colony of Japan, whereas the people in China have strong resentments deeply felt over Japan's brutality in World War II, and these are an integral part of the teaching of Chinese history in mainland Chinese schools. And there are strategic implications of Taiwan moving closer to Japan. For one thing, Taiwan would like to improve its indigenous capacity to produce military weaponry, so they're not as dependent on foreign inputs of military weaponry. Presently, the Taiwanese are working on diesel submarine technology. The Americans are not able to assist very much with diesel submarine technology because the Americans have gone all nuclear submarines. But the Japanese are a world leader in diesel submarine technology, which begs the question as to whether the Japanese would be prepared to support Taiwan's defense by transferring military resources to Japan, either explicitly or under the table. And this kind of thing could cause considerable concern in Beijing. So as the KMT ponders the prospect of the DPP's new Taiwan, it's not inconceivable that over the transitional period until the presidency moves to the DPP from the KMT on May the 20th, that the KMT might take some action to advance the One China program before they leave power, possibly forever. And that would be in collaboration with the mainland, who of course had wished that the KMT had won the election. And as Michael said, immediately following the election, the US dispatched senior envoys to both Taipei and to Beijing to counsel calm, nobody do anything rash. But you can't rule out this scenario as a possibility if the KMT and the Chinese communists feel backed up against the wall by the Democratic Progressive Party's liberal politics. I mean, I think the thing about it is that, we like democracy in Taiwan. The election, as Michael said, had many resemblances to the recent Canadian election that elected Prime Minister Trudeau. A progressive political program, same-sex marriage, environment, social justice, and a young and dynamic changing of the generations in leadership. But the geopolitical reality of a rising China, which is not only hostile to the values of citizenship and universal entitlement to human rights, but rabidly nationalistic, means that, the kind of democracy in Taiwan, even if it is Chinese culturally based democracy, could end up very badly, and that, is something that we have to be prepared for. Just to talk briefly about Canada-Taiwan relations, I am not optimistic that we'll see any positive change in the dynamic between Canada and Taiwan. Last night, Prime Minister Trudeau and our Minister of Global Affairs, Stéphane Dion, both personally attended a reception at our Foreign Ministry to mark the 45th anniversary of the establishment of relations with the People's Republic of China. It was quite a glittering affair. And we know that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be leading a high-level trade mission to China this spring, which signals that his government intends to put stronger engagement with China at the forefront of our Canadian national economic game plan. I think that Mr. Trudeau's government is feeling pressure to show that it's taking steps to address our current economic downturn due to the decline in world commodity prices. And he wants to show that he's doing something that will address our growing federal debt. And so I think it's reasonable to assume that he will tout a free trade deal with China as the road to Canada's economic revival. So I think in that context, it's unlikely that our government will do anything on Taiwan that could evoke any kind of negative response from Beijing. The government will be very sensitive to the concerns of China for non-economic issues. That would include Taiwan, that would include Tibet, that would include our concerns about allegations of Chinese human rights abuse, that would include our concerns about Chinese support for rogue regimes in the Third World. Essentially, I think this government has defined our primary relationship with China as in promoting Canadian prosperity, and that should take the main emphasis, and that these other issues should not be allowed to influence our new rapprochement with China to bring about you know, an improved Canadian economy. I think an important marker for Canada-Taiwan relations would be the response of Canada to Taiwan's desire to diversify its economy beyond the faltering Chinese economy to more trade with other partners. And what they'd really like to do would be to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would in fact involve considerable change in the way the Chinese economic institutions are organized to make Taiwan eligible for membership in the TPP. But of course, you know, as is their normal policy, China opposes Taiwan participating in the TPP if China is not part of the TPP. And so I could not see Canada supporting Taiwan entering the TPP, even if Taiwan has economic institutions in compliance with the requirements for TPP membership. I think as things stand now, I'm frankly not anticipating that Canada will be respecting the Canadian values of our Charter and Rights and Freedoms with respect to Canada's relations with Taiwan. You know, it's clear that we see ourselves, and perhaps because of the influence of Canadians who have extensive economic interests in China, such as Power Corporation, Bombardier, SNC-Lavalin, that the Liberal government will be very sensitive to any relations with Taiwan responding to the new democratic regime there. But, you know, that being said, our Liberal government has only been in power for a short time. The government may be prepared to adopt a values-based, principled policy in global affairs in the years ahead. And I think if we did adopt a values-based, principled Canadian policy in global affairs, that would not be good news for enhanced relations with China because of so many concerns with regard to the incompatibility between our regimes. But if we did decide that we wanted to ensure that we express Canadian values in our foreign dealings, that would be very good news for us enhancing our relations with the new regime in Taiwan. So let's see how it goes in the years ahead. But I continue to feel that regardless of the change of government in Taiwan, it's unlikely that our new Liberal government will adopt a policy even as sympathetic to Taiwan as that of the Harper Conservatives, who, like the KMT, may have also bit the dust permanently.
Thank you so much. All right, well, thank you to all our panelists, and we have about half an hour, give or take, maybe a little bit more than that, for discussion. So there's time to get in several questions, I should think. I would encourage you to identify yourself so we know who you are, and also if you could be concise in your question or comment, and direct it either